Your brain is rewiring itself right now, not metaphorically, literally. Your amygdala, the fear center, is getting stronger. Your hippocampus, where you store memories, is starting to shrink. And the prefrontal cortex, the part of you that thinks clearly and makes good decisions, is losing ground. All in the next 7 days of unbroken stress. Most people don't feel it happening because the damage isn't sharp. It's subtle. It's quiet. By day 7, you won't have a dramatic breakdown. You'll just notice you're forgetting more, snapping faster, and thinking less clearly than you remember being capable of. That's not just how you feel. That's how your brain has actually changed. Imagine it's Monday morning and your week detonates before you even finish your first coffee. Your phone lights up with messages, your inbox is a wall of red flags, and 3 urgent deadlines all quietly moved themselves to today. You tell yourself you just need to push through, so you do. Meeting to meeting, ping to ping. No real pause, no real off switch. By Wednesday, you notice tiny cracks. You open a tab and forget why. You walk into a room and lose the thought halfway through the doorway. You snap at someone for a harmless question, then feel guilty but too drained to fully care. At night you lie in bed, eyes burning, thumb scrolling through bad news and random videos, because actually resting feels impossible. On the surface, it looks like just a bad week. In fact, inside your skull, it's like a storm is rolling in. Think of it this way. Your brain was built for short sprints of stress, not a 7-day marathon. This is the phase when survival mode quietly becomes the default. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline stop being occasional visitors and start acting like permanent residents. Your heart beats a little faster, your breathing stays a little higher. Your body keeps pouring energy into being on, even when you're just sitting on the couch. Meanwhile, deep in the neural circuitry, delicate connections are being tested, rewired, and in some cases weakened. Inside that storm, 3 key regions are pulled into a hidden drama. Your hippocampus, the memory librarian of your brain, is trying to file new experiences while cortisol keeps slamming the cabinet doors. Your amygdala, the internal alarm system, is scanning for danger and gradually turning up the volume on every minor problem. And your prefrontal cortex, the wise planner right behind your forehead, is supposed to keep everyone calm and rational, but it's being drowned in emergency signals. It's like the control room of your mind is stuck in a fire drill that never ends. Here's the unsettling question. Can just 7 days of this nonstop pressure actually start to reshape your brain's structure and chemistry, not in years, in days? Can a single overloaded week begin shrinking connections in the hippocampus, overcharging circuits in the amygdala, and dulling the decision-making power of your prefrontal cortex? Research suggests the answer leans closer to yes than you might expect. This marks a turning point in how you think about stress. It isn't only about feeling tired or burned out. Over a single week, rising cortisol, broken sleep, and emotional whiplash can start changing how your neurons talk, how your cravings spike, and how your mood swings. But those same 7 days can also be the window when small relief habits begin to protect and even repair your brain. Those 7 days are not just a bad mood. They are a different operating mode for your brain. Imagine your brain as an engine built for quick accelerations and sudden brakes. It is designed for a sharp threat, a deadline, a near miss on the road, then a return to cruising speed. Chronic stress is what happens when you hold the pedal down at redline, not for seconds, but for an entire week. It still runs, but everything inside starts to heat up. Think of it this way. Stress is not only a feeling, it is a biochemical command. The moment your brain senses danger, 2 key hormones step forward like conductors of a survival orchestra. Adrenaline surges first, snapping your heart rate up, sharpening your attention, and sending blood toward your muscles. Cortisol follows, slower but more strategic, redirecting energy away from long-term projects like repair, learning, and deep thinking and into raw survival. This is the phase when your brain quietly changes its priorities. Blood flow shifts from regions that handle reflection and planning toward regions that handle threat detection and quick reactions. In fact, your brain is trading intelligence for speed. Helpful in a 1-minute crisis. Costly when that crisis stretches into 7 days. Inside your skull, 3 main characters start fighting for the microphone. Your prefrontal cortex is the calm CEO, the part of your brain that weighs options, resists impulses, and holds long-term goals in mind. The amygdala is the anxious security guard, scanning for danger, ready to hit the alarm at the slightest hint of risk. The hippocampus is the meticulous archivist, filing memories, linking experiences, and helping you learn from what just happened. Under chronic stress, the security guard gets louder. The CEO gets interrupted. The archivist works in a power outage. Adrenaline and cortisol keep boosting the amygdala's sensitivity, so threats feel closer and louder. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex loses some control over emotions and urges, and the hippocampus struggles to form clear, stable memories. This is why a week of pressure can leave you snappy, forgetful, and strangely foggy. It is like someone changed the lighting in your brain's control room. The alarm panel glows bright red, while the planning desk and filing cabinets fade into the shadows. You are still you, but your default state has shifted towards survival mode. That temporary mode becomes the new normal on a very specific day. Day 1 of unbroken stress. Imagine how quickly it starts. One unexpected email, a tense message from your boss, a late-night notification that pulls you back into a problem you thought was solved. Your heart rate jumps before you fully read the words. Your breathing shifts from slow and deep to shallow and fast. In that instant, your brain quietly reorders your entire internal priority list. Laundry, dinner plans, even the show playing in the background all fade. The problem moves to the center of the stage, and everything else gets pushed into the dark. This is the phase when your built-in alarm system slams on. Deep inside your brain, the hypothalamus acts like a crisis dispatcher. It sends a chemical signal to the pituitary gland, which then calls your adrenal glands sitting on top of your kidneys. Moments later, cortisol and adrenaline surge into your bloodstream. Think of it this way. Your hormones are delivering a single loud message. Mobilize every resource you have. You feel it as a rush. Hands slightly sweaty, jaw a little tight. Thoughts speed up, but they all orbit the same issue. It's like your mental camera lens zooms in so far on the threat that the rest of your life blurs into the background. In fact, this narrow focus is by design. For short bursts, it makes you faster, sharper, more willing to act. Meanwhile, the amygdala, your brain's threat detector, cranks up its volume. It starts scanning every tone of voice, every half-finished sentence, every silence for danger. At the same time, your prefrontal cortex, the part that weighs pros and cons, that remembers long-term goals, steps back. Not because it is broken, but because your brain has decided that speed matters more than wisdom right now. On day 1, you experience this as tunnel vision. You keep rereading the same line of an email. You open a tab and forget why. You hear someone talking to you, but the words don't land. Your brain is diverting processing power away from learning, creativity, and nuance, and pouring it into immediate survival. This is the backup generator mode of your nervous system, powerful, noisy, not meant to run the whole building for long. Biologically, this response is adaptive. Your body shifts blood flow, ramps up glucose release, and primes muscles to move. If the stressor ended here, argument resolved, crisis contained, your hormones would gradually fall, Your prefrontal cortex would reclaim control, and your brain would treat it as a completed emergency drill. But here's the catch. If that email leads to another conflict, another deadline, another night of replaying conversations in bed, your brain stops filing this as a one-time event. Day 1 begins to look less like a spike and more like a new baseline. And once your brain decides the world is permanently unsafe, the changes that follow in day 2 and beyond are no longer just temporary boosts, they are structural rewrites. By the time day 2 begins, the stress isn't an event anymore. It's the atmosphere. You open your eyes and your body is already braced, like it woke up before you did. Imagine lying there, staring at the ceiling for a second, and before your feet even hit the floor, your hand is on your phone. Notifications, red dots, unfinished conversations. Your brain doesn't ease into the day. It launches straight into threat assessment. That low hum in your chest? That's your stress system acting as if the danger never ended overnight. Under normal conditions, your hormones follow a rhythm. Cortisol rises in the morning to get you out of bed, then gradually falls across the day so your brain can wind down at night. Think of it this way. It's like a natural sunrise and sunset inside your bloodstream. On day 2 of repeated stress, that curve begins to flatten. Cortisol doesn't come down as far or as fast. The morning high bleeds into the afternoon, and the evening low never really arrives. This is the phase when your brain lives in a semi-alert state. You feel wired but not truly awake, tired but not allowed to rest. Even small tasks feel more urgent than they should, because your internal alarm never fully resets. In fact, brain imaging studies show that with ongoing stress, the amygdala, the fear and threat center, starts firing more easily, even to mild signals. Emails that yesterday felt annoying now feel dangerous. A neutral text from your boss suddenly reads as cold. A friend's blank expression looks like disappointment. The amygdala is learning fast. Threats are everywhere. Better overreact than miss one. Its circuits strengthen with every stressful ping and tense conversation, making your emotional reactions quicker and harder to dial back. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, focus, and self-control, is already getting tired. High cortisol pulls energy and blood. Flow away from this region because in survival mode, long-term strategy is a luxury. Decisions that used to be automatic, what to tackle first, how to reply, whether to say yes or no, now feel heavy. You bounce between procrastinating and doing the easiest possible task. You open a tab, forget why, then jump to something else. It's like your mental whiteboard keeps getting erased mid-sentence. Complex plans are harder to hold in mind, so you default to quick fixes, impulsive messages, rushed choices, grabbing whatever is in front of you. This marks a turning point. By day 2, your brain is already shifting its priorities. Less nuance, more speed, less reflection, more reaction. And if this continues into day 3, the balance tilts even further, as survival circuits begin to outrun your higher reasoning in ways that are not just emotional, but clearly visible on brain scans. By day 3, that shift is no longer subtle. You can feel it in the way you move through your day. Conversations feel sharper, not because anyone is being cruel, but because your reactions fire before your reasoning can catch up. Imagine trying to talk through a minor disagreement with a partner or coworker. A simple question suddenly sounds like criticism. Your voice tightens, you interrupt, you replay the exchange in your head later and wonder, why did I snap like that? This is the phase when your brain is prioritizing speed over accuracy. The system that usually helps you pause, reframe, and respond is running on low power. You notice it in quieter moments too. You stare at an email, reread the same sentence 3 times and nothing sticks. A short article feels like a wall of symbols instead of ideas. It's not that your intelligence vanished overnight. It's that the part of your brain responsible for holding information online and manipulating it, your prefrontal cortex, is being chemically sidelined by stress hormones. Think of it this way. Under 3 days of elevated cortisol and adrenaline, your brain's energy budget is being rewritten. The prefrontal cortex, which normally handles planning, impulse control, and weighing long-term consequences, is getting less blood flow and reduced connectivity. Neurons here fire less synchronously, and the circuits that support working memory and flexible thinking become noisy. In fact, brain imaging studies show measurable drops in prefrontal activity under sustained stress, even in healthy adults. It's like your brain is rerouting power from the thinking brain to the survival brain, dimming the office lights so the emergency generators can run the alarms. You still show up to work, answer messages, make decisions, but more on reflex, less on reflection. Short-term comfort starts to outweigh long-term goals, not because you suddenly stopped caring, but because the circuitry that represents future consequences is literally underpowered. This is when real-life choices begin to shift. You promise yourself you'll eat clean, then end up grabbing junk food on the way home, telling yourself you deserve it. You sit down to focus, but your hand drifts to your phone and 20 minutes disappear into doom scrolling. You hear yourself snapping at a partner over dishes or a late text, and only afterward does it register how disproportionate it was. These are not moral failures, they are signatures of a prefrontal cortex losing ground, of your brain under siege trying to conserve resources. Meanwhile, another region is quietly taking advantage of this power vacuum. As the rational lights dim, your fear and threat center, the amygdala, starts to claim more influence over how you feel, what you notice, and what you remember. By day 4, that shift doesn't just change your reactions in the moment, it begins to reshape your entire emotional world in ways you might not recognize until it's already in motion. By day 4, it feels like your emotions are running the show, but to really understand what's happening, you need to zoom out for a moment. Imagine your brain not in this week, but 50,000 years ago. Back then, stress was simple, brutal, and short. A predator in the bushes, a sudden storm, a rival tribe. Your heart would slam, your hormones would spike, your muscles would flood with energy. Minutes, maybe hours of intense threat, and then it was over. Either you escaped, you fought, or you hid until the danger passed. Your body was built around that rhythm. Surge, respond, recover. Now think about your last 7 days. No lion, no battlefield, just an inbox that never empties, a bank account that never feels safe, a social feed that never stops judging. The danger isn't claws or teeth. It's notifications, deadlines, and quiet fears about the future. The problem is that your brain doesn't really know the difference. Think of it this way. The same circuits that once fired when you saw a shadow move in the dark now light up when your boss messages you at 10 p.m. The same hormones that were designed to flood your muscles with glucose for a sprint now flood your brain with cortisol for a meeting. This is the phase when an ancient survival system is being forced into a modern 24/7 job it was never hired for. It's like installing a fire alarm that was meant to scream only during actual flames, but instead, it starts humming quietly in the background. Not loud enough to send you running outside, just persistent enough that every conversation, every decision, every moment of rest has that faint siren underneath. Over days, the building begins to adapt around the noise. Doors are kept half open, systems rerouted, routines reshaped to accommodate a threat that never fully arrives and never fully ends. Your brain does the same. In fact, many people call this being always on edge and treat it as normal. But biologically, this is a distinct state. Cortisol stays higher, your amygdala stays more reactive, and your prefrontal cortex, the rational planner, stays partially dialed down. Neurons in your emotional and fear circuits strengthen their connections, while cells in memory and learning regions like the hippocampus can start to lose them. Meanwhile, your body reads this as the new baseline. Sleep gets lighter. Small problems feel bigger. You forget simple details not because you are careless, but because your brain is reallocating energy toward watching for danger instead of building new memories. This marks a turning point in the timeline. So what happens when this ancient alarm system has been pulled for 4 days straight? What does that constant background siren do to the brain regions that process fear, emotion, and threat next? Day 4 is when the alarm stops feeling like a spike and starts feeling like a soundtrack. You wake up wired but tired. Your body is buzzing, but your energy feels thin, like it could tear at any second. Imagine glancing at your phone and feeling your heart jump at a simple notification. A "can we talk?" message suddenly feels dangerous. A neutral comment from a coworker replays in your mind all afternoon as your brain quietly edits it into criticism. This is the phase when you start overthinking small interactions and automatically filling in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. Under the surface, the chemistry hasn't changed its mind. Cortisol is still dripping into your brain, and those stress hormones are now training your amygdala. The amygdala is your brain's fear and threat detector. With repeated stress signals, the synapses inside it, the tiny junctions where neurons talk, begin to strengthen. Think of it this way. Every time you feel stressed, you walk the same path through a forest. By day 4, that path isn't a trail anymore. It's a highway. Once that highway is built, hypervigilance kicks in. Your brain starts over-detecting danger in places that used to feel neutral. Tone of voice on a call sounds sharper. A delayed reply to a text feels like rejection. Even your own bodily sensations, like a flutter in your chest or a tight stomach, get flagged as potential threats, fueling more anxiety and irritability. It's like your internal smoke detector has been turned up so high that burnt toast and a real fire trigger the same alarm. A manager in back-to-back meetings starts reading hidden criticism into every email subject line. A simple "please review" lands as "you failed." A new parent finds their brain constantly scanning the room. Is the baby breathing? Is the door locked? Did that noise mean danger? The stress response that once protected becomes the lens through which everything is filtered. In fact, this constant scanning costs energy. Your body diverts resources towards staying on alert, and your brain spends more of its metabolism on rapid threat detection and less on calm reflection. That's why you feel exhausted but can't switch off. Sleep gets lighter. Small conflicts feel bigger. Decisions feel rushed because the amygdala is voting loudly for survival right now. Meanwhile, another region is starting to feel the strain. The hippocampus, the part of your brain that handles memory and context, is bathing in the same stress hormones. Its delicate cells are more vulnerable to cortisol, and its job is the opposite of the amygdala's, to say, "This is familiar, this is safe, remember?" So what happens when the fear center is getting stronger while the memory and context center quietly begins to falter? That imbalance is where the next shift begins. That imbalance doesn't stay theoretical for long. By the middle of a stressful week, you can feel it in the most ordinary moments. You walk into a room and freeze. Why are you here? You stare at the doorway, mentally rewinding your last 3 steps like a glitching video. Imagine sitting at your laptop with 10 tabs open. You click one, then another, then suddenly have no idea what you were looking for. You reread the same instructions 3 times and still have to go back again. A colleague you've known for years walks by, and for a split second their name just vanishes. It's like your brain is buffering. This is the phase when your hippocampus starts to struggle. Think of it this way. The hippocampus is your brain's memory librarian. It takes new experiences, emails, conversations, directions, and files them in the right place, linking them to what you already know so you can find them later. When it's working well, you feel on it. You remember where you saved that document, what you promised, why you opened that tab. Under chronic stress, that librarian is working in a chemical storm. Cortisol levels stay high instead of peaking and dropping. In fact, in animal studies, just a few days of elevated stress hormones are enough to reduce the birth of new neurons in the hippocampus and weaken synaptic connections between existing cells. The shelves are still there, but fewer new books are being added, and the catalog system starts to flicker. This marks a turning point in how your brain handles memory. Those midweek lapses are not just being distracted or lazy. Your brain is reallocating resources. With the amygdala on high alert, more energy goes into scanning for threats and less into carefully encoding context and detail. The result is that new memories feel slippery. You can read, but it doesn't stick. You can listen, but it doesn't anchor. Think of it this way. Under exam pressure, a work deadline, or a family crisis, your brain is choosing survival over intelligence. That student who suddenly blanks on concepts they knew yesterday, the manager who forgets key points in a meeting, the parent who can't remember where the car is parked, each is experiencing a hippocampus under chemical stress. The wiring for learning and recall is being tugged at by hormones meant for short emergencies, not long weeks. Meanwhile, this same week of stress is quietly setting up the next problem. At night, when your brain should be cleaning itself and consolidating memories, those same stress signals begin to interfere with sleep and the brain's overnight waste removal system. The fog you feel in the afternoon is only half the story. What happens in the dark will push it even further. By night 4 or 5, the stress isn't just a daytime problem anymore. It follows you into the dark. You're exhausted, heavy-eyed, but the moment you lie down, your brain refuses to switch off. You replay that awkward conversation from earlier. Then tomorrow's deadlines. Then a dozen what-if scenarios that spiral into worst-case movies in your head. Imagine glancing at your phone, telling yourself you'll scroll for 2 minutes, and suddenly it's 1:47 a.m. Or you do fall asleep, only to snap awake at 3 a.m., heart thudding, mind racing as if it's morning already. Your body is in bed, but your brain is still in a meeting. This is the phase when elevated cortisol and adrenaline start hijacking your sleep architecture. Normally, these hormones should dip at night, allowing you to slide into deep, slow-wave sleep and then cycle into REM. Under chronic stress, cortisol stays high and adrenaline keeps flickering like a car engine idling too fast. You might fall asleep, but you're yanked out of the deeper stages your brain desperately needs. Think of it this way. Deep sleep is when your brain files memories, and REM is when it processes emotions and stress. With those stages cut short or fragmented, yesterday's problems don't get properly saved and sorted. They spill into the next day, half processed, which is why you wake up feeling like you never really left yesterday behind. Meanwhile, another system is being disrupted in the background, your brain's glymphatic system. It's like an overnight cleaning crew that only clocks in when you're in deep sleep. Cerebrospinal fluid washes through brain tissue, flushing away metabolic waste, including proteins linked to degeneration when they build up. On these stress-fractured nights, that cleaning window shrinks. Less deep sleep means less flushing, so more waste lingers. The result shows up the next morning as that thick, cottony brain fog. You read the same sentence 3 times, you walk into a room and forget why. Your brain isn't just tired, its cells literally didn't get a full clean out. On top of that, disrupted sleep throws your neurotransmitters off balance. Serotonin, which stabilizes mood, and dopamine, which drives motivation and reward, both depend on solid sleep and stable circadian rhythms. After a few nights like this, your mood dips, your patience thins, and motivation feels distant. Even small tasks feel heavier because the chemical signals that usually push you forward are misfiring. This marks a turning point in the stress cycle. By morning, your brain starts looking for quick hacks to feel better. Sugar, ultra-processed snacks, endless scrolling, constant notifications. It's like a tired manager grabbing the fastest, loudest employees, not the most reliable ones. Those choices briefly spike dopamine, but they also reinforce the same circuits that keep you wired and unrested. And this is where the loop tightens. Poor sleep makes your brain crave quick fixes. Those quick fixes disrupt your sleep and hormones even more. That question might already feel uncomfortably familiar, because by this point in the week-long timeline, many people are already living inside that loop, wired but exhausted, foggy but overstimulated, reaching for quick fixes while feeling their patience get thinner by the hour. Imagine replaying your last week like a highlight reel. How many days in a row have you felt on edge without a real reset, not just a scroll break or a rushed meal, but an actual downshift for your nervous system? Think of it this way. If the last 4 or 5 days have blurred together into one long, tense stretch, your brain has been operating in emergency mode far longer than it was designed to. This is the phase when the patterns you have noticed, forgetting why you walked into a room, snapping at small frustrations, lying awake even when you are exhausted, stop being random quirks and start looking like the predictable biology of chronic stress. For you, what hits hardest? Is it memory, where names, tabs, and to-dos slip away faster than you can catch them? Is it sleep, where your body is tired but your brain keeps replaying conversations and worst-case scenarios? Maybe it is cravings, needing sugar, caffeine, or endless stimulation just to feel vaguely normal. Or mood, where everything feels louder, closer, and harder to tolerate. Treat this like a shared experiment, not a confession. In the comments, write 2 simple data points. How many days in a row you have felt stressed without a real break? And which brain change from this video feels the most accurate? Memory glitches, broken sleep, nonstop cravings, or that thin, easily triggered mood? It is like building a live map of what chronic stress is doing to real brains in real time. In fact, seeing that other people are stuck in similar loops can be its own kind of relief. Your brain is not failing. Your hormones and circuits are responding exactly the way a survival system is wired to respond when it thinks the threat never ends. If you want to keep going deeper into what your brain is doing under everyday habits, stress, fasting, late-night screens, and how those same circuits can be trained back toward clarity and calm, hit subscribe or follow. That way, your feed becomes a reminder of what your body is trying to do for you, not just another source of pressure. Meanwhile, this marks a turning point in the timeline. Days 1 to 4 are about feeling frayed. Days 5 to 7 are when the architecture of your brain starts to shift more dramatically. By day 5, your brain feels like it's pressing the gas and the brakes at the same time. You're drained, heavy, and foggy, yet your thoughts keep racing as if someone left the lights on in your head all night. Imagine sitting down after a long day, knowing you should sleep, but instead, your hand drifts to your phone, to snacks, to another coffee. This is the phase when stress has rewired your motivation circuits just enough that real rest feels strangely unsatisfying, while quick hits of stimulation feel urgent. You are tired, but you are not done chasing relief. Deep inside your brain, the reward pathways are now feeling the cost of 5 straight days of elevated cortisol, Under normal conditions, dopamine pulses in measured bursts when you finish a task, have a meaningful conversation, or solve a problem. It's like a quiet, well-done signal that keeps you moving through ordinary life. By day 5, chronic stress blunts that signal. The same emails, chores, or study sessions suddenly feel flat, unrewarding, and disproportionately hard to start. Think of it this way. Your dopamine system has turned down the volume on everyday rewards, but it is still wired to notice anything loud and fast. Sugar, caffeine, ultra-salty snacks, endless scrolling, rapid-fire videos. These offer steep, sudden spikes of dopamine with almost no effort. Your body is not being weak. Your brain is trying to self-medicate a depleted reward system with the cheapest, quickest chemistry it can find. Meanwhile, each hit trains the circuit further. You tell yourself you will watch one episode, check one notification, eat one cookie. The first spike briefly cuts through the exhaustion, but the crash comes quickly, leaving dopamine even more unstable. Over days, this pattern can make normal tasks feel more and more pointless, while junk food, binge watching, or compulsive phone checking start to feel irresistible, especially late at night, when your defenses are lowest. Serotonin, the mood-stabilizing partner in this network, is also under pressure. High cortisol can interfere with its production and signaling, especially when stress has already disrupted your sleep and appetite. By the end of day 5, that can translate into irritability, a shorter fuse, or a dull emotional flatness where you do not feel dramatically sad. You just do not feel much at all. This marks a turning point because the pattern now feeds itself. Poor sleep alters your hormones the next morning, nudging you toward more caffeine and sugar. That further disturbs your circadian rhythm, which then worsens dopamine and serotonin balance the following night. In fact, by day 6 and 7, brain scans in chronically stressed people begin to show measurable changes in regions tied to memory and mood. The architecture of your brain is about to respond to this chemistry. The question is, does it adapt, or does it begin to erode? This is where the story inside your head suddenly becomes visible. Imagine pressing pause on your week and sliding your brain into an MRI scanner. The chemistry you've been feeling, racing thoughts, poor sleep, that wired but tired energy, now shows up as actual physical changes on a screen. Think of it this way. Instead of following your days, zoom out and look at patterns researchers see in people who live in that day 7 stress state for weeks or months. Their brain scans tell a consistent story. The areas that should help you remember, plan, and stay emotionally steady begin to thin, while the region that detects threat grows louder and in some cases larger. Start with the hippocampus, your brain's memory librarian. On scans of people under chronic stress, anxiety, or depression, this region is often smaller or less dense. It's like the shelves are still there, but the books are packed more loosely, with fewer new volumes arriving. Under the surface, cortisol is reducing neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells, and weakening synaptic connections that help you form and retrieve memories. That's why a stressed student can stare at notes for hours and still forget what was studied the next morning. Move forward to the prefrontal cortex, the part right behind your forehead that handles planning, impulse control, and rational decision-making. Brain imaging shows reduced thickness and lower volume here in people who've been under long-term pressure. This is the phase when the CEO of your brain loses staff and office space. Fewer connections mean it's harder to focus, harder to weigh options, and easier to snap or shut down when one more demand hits your inbox. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, often shows the opposite pattern. In chronic stress, it can become more active and, in some studies, slightly larger. Imagine a security guard that's been overtrained in worst-case scenarios. It fires earlier, stays on longer, and sends stronger signals, even when the threat is just an email subject line or a passing comment. Over time, this shift wires your brain to expect danger, biasing you toward anxiety and emotional reactivity. Now here's the critical part. Those dramatic changes on human scans reflect the accumulation of many stressed weeks, but the trajectory starts fast. Animal studies show that within days of repeated stress, neurogenesis in the hippocampus drops, dendrites start to retract, and synapses remodel. This marks a turning point. 7 days is not nothing. It's the opening chapter of that same story. So by the end of one brutally stressful week, your brain hasn't fully shrunk. But the balance is already tilting. The regions that help you remember and plan are beginning to thin functionally, while the alarm network is getting more muscular. The question now is, if you keep living like this, how close are you moving toward the brain profile of chronic anxiety, depression, and long-term cognitive decline? And what exactly does day 7 look like from the inside? By day 6, you're not just having a bad week anymore. You're starting to feel like this is who you are now. Imagine waking up and realizing you don't feel exactly panicked, just flat, detached. The email that would normally annoy you now feels overwhelming. A small request from a friend feels like too much. You catch yourself thinking, what's the point? Or on the other end, you feel weirdly close to tears over nothing. The highs are muted, but the lows are right under the surface. This is the phase when your emotional circuits reflect the repetition. For almost 7 days, your brain has been bathed in stress hormones, especially cortisol. Each surge has trained your neural pathways, the way driving the same route every day carves a default in your mind. Fear and worry circuits in the amygdala have become the fast lane. Meanwhile, the routes for calm focus, curiosity, and flexible thinking are being used less, so they feel harder to access when you need them. Think of it this way. Your brain is optimizing for survival, not for happiness or long-term goals. It's like your internal GPS has been locked onto avoid danger now, even when there's no real threat in front of you. So you interpret a neutral text as criticism, a minor delay as a disaster, a normal silence from someone as rejection. The more you react this way, the more those pathways strengthen, making it easier for your brain to choose them again tomorrow. By day 6 and 7, early functional changes in key regions are showing up in your daily life. The hippocampus, your memory and learning center, is especially sensitive to cortisol. You might walk into a room and forget why. You reread the same sentence and nothing sticks. New information feels slippery because stress is disrupting how your cells form and stabilize new synapses. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the part that plans, weighs consequences, and zooms out, is running on reduced bandwidth. In fact, this is why it becomes so hard to see beyond the immediate crisis. You fixate on today's problem and lose sight of next week's solution. Decisions get more reactive. Doom scrolling instead of sleeping, snapping instead of pausing, overworking instead of setting limits. Your brain is trading foresight for short-term control. If this pattern repeats week after week, the risks stop being just emotional. Chronic stress is linked to higher rates of anxiety and depression, and over time, measurable shrinkage in vulnerable regions like the hippocampus and parts of the prefrontal cortex. The alarm system thickens, the reflective system thins. Your brain profile slowly shifts toward chronic vigilance and away from resilience. But this marks a turning point, not a life sentence. The same plasticity that wired in these stress pathways can wire in safety and recovery. Tiny daily habits, one relaxing breath. 1. Before reacting, a 10-minute walk, a consistent wind down before sleep. are like laying new tracks. Imagine if the same brain that felt hijacked after 7 days of stress could begin reversing that damage in the next 7. Not with a retreat or a life overhaul, but with tiny, repeatable signals that tell your nervous system, you're safe enough to think again. This is the phase when your brain's hidden superpower steps in. Neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to rewire, to change the strength and even the shape of its connections based on what you repeatedly experience. Under chronic stress, that plasticity carved deep grooves for fear, urgency, and worst-case scenarios. But it is not a one-way street. The same plasticity can grow new connections for calm, focus, and memory if you start feeding it different signals. Think of it this way. Cortisol is like a chemical narrator, constantly telling your cells whether the world is dangerous or manageable. When cortisol stays high, your brain keeps diverting energy into survival pathways, reinforcing the amygdala and weakening the prefrontal cortex. When you lower cortisol, even slightly, you change the story. Safety signals, slow breathing, predictable routines, supportive conversations, tell your brain it can afford to reroute energy back into planning, learning, and emotional control. In fact, studies on chronic stress show that when cortisol drops and sleep improves, neurogenesis in the hippocampus can restart. New brain cells begin to appear in the very region that stress was shrinking. Connections between your prefrontal cortex and amygdala strengthen, giving you more top-down control over alarm signals. It's like your brain quietly reopening lanes on a highway that were closed during an emergency, allowing traffic, your thoughts, your memories, your decisions, to flow more smoothly again. Meanwhile, even very short daily practices can act as powerful levers. 10 minutes of deep, diaphragmatic breathing can reduce amygdala activity and calm your heart rate. A simple walk outside after a stressful meeting can lower cortisol and shift blood flow back toward your prefrontal cortex. A 2-minute focused gratitude practice before sleep can nudge your brain's attention away from threat scanning and toward stability. These habits are small, but your neurons are listening every time. It helps to picture your week as a set of tracks. 7 days of nonstop stress began carving a fast, efficient railway for anxiety and reactivity. The more those trains ran, the smoother the path became. 7 days of consistent micro-relief start laying down a parallel track, one that routes signals through calm breathing, clearer thinking, and better memory. At first, the calm track is bumpy and slow. With repetition, it becomes the preferred route. This marks a turning point in the story of your brain. You're not erasing the stress-built pathways overnight, you're out competing them. This is the phase when you stop just surviving your week and start running an experiment on your brain. Imagine taking 7 days that would normally dissolve into stress and turning each one into a tiny targeted reset for a different piece of your stress chemistry. Think of it this way. Instead of overhauling your entire life, you give your brain one small, repeatable habit per day. Breath, movement, light, connection, focus, sleep, meaning. Each one leans on the same biology that stress has been hijacking, but now you're steering it on purpose. Day 1 is breath. 10 to 15 minutes of slow breathing or simple mindfulness is like hitting a dimmer switch on the amygdala. Imaging studies show that when you extend your exhale and keep your attention on the breath, activity in the fear center drops while the prefrontal cortex lights back up. You feel it as a subtle shift. Your body is still alert, but the edge softens and your decisions stop coming from pure alarm. Day 2 is movement. A brisk walk, a short bodyweight circuit, even dancing in your kitchen for 10 minutes pushes your metabolism away from pure cortisol mode. Your muscles pull in more glucose, your hormones rebalance, and your brain releases BDNF, a growth factor that protects the hippocampus. In fact, even brief daily movement has been linked to increased neurogenesis, helping new cells survive in the very region stress tries to shrink. Day 3, you use light. Morning daylight on your eyes anchors your circadian rhythm, telling your brain, this is daytime, this is safe. Meanwhile, evening dimness teaches your body to let melatonin rise again. It's like giving your internal clock a hard reset, which quietly steadies cortisol spikes, cravings, and that wired but tired feeling at night. Day 4 is connection. A 10-minute call with someone you trust, a real conversation at dinner, even a brief moment of genuine eye contact releases oxytocin. This hormone doesn't just feel warm, it directly dampens amygdala reactivity and supports prefrontal control. Your brain stops scanning only for threat and remembers that other humans can be a safety signal. Day 5, you reclaim focus. Set a timer, remove distractions, and do one meaningful task for 15 minutes. It's like resistance training for your prefrontal cortex. Each time you notice your attention wander and bring it back, you're strengthening the very circuits stress has been eroding. Day 6 is sleep protection. Screens off earlier, a consistent bedtime, and a simple wind-down ritual give your glymphatic system room to work. This is the brain's night shift cleaning crew, flushing out waste between cells and restoring neurotransmitter balance so tomorrow's mood and memory aren't running on yesterday's leftovers. Day 7, you aim at meaning. Write for 10 minutes about what actually matters to you, or about one way this stressful period could shape you instead of just draining you. This marks a turning point. You're not only lowering stress chemistry, you're changing the story your brain tells about it. Imagine zooming all the way out on the last 7 days of your life. The emails, the pings, the deadlines, the arguments. From that distance, chronic stress stops looking like a personal failure and starts looking like what it really is. Your survival system playing the wrong song for too long. Think of it this way. Your brain is a survival orchestra. The amygdala is the alarm bell. The prefrontal cortex is the conductor. And your hormones are the percussion driving the tempo. Under a real short-term threat, they perform a brilliant, intense piece. Heart racing, cortisol up, focus sharp. Then the danger ends. The music quiets and your body resets. Modern life doesn't give that reset. Your brain was built for a sprint away from a predator, not for 7 days of nonstop notifications, financial pressure, and social tension. It's like using a fire alarm as your morning alarm clock. The system isn't broken, the environment keeps yanking the lever. This is the phase when feeling overwhelmed is not a character flaw, it's a predictable biological response. High cortisol keeps pulsing. Your hippocampus, the memory center, is trying to file new experiences, but the stress chemistry keeps interrupting the process. You forget why you opened a tab, or walk into a room and lose the thread. Meanwhile, the amygdala becomes more sensitive, tagging more events as threats, even when you're just reading an email. In fact, the very circuits that feel out of control under chronic stress are the same ones that make you capable when they're regulated. Short bursts of stress can sharpen attention, fuel motivation, and help your brain lock in learning. That same cortisol spike that feels awful when it never turns off is incredibly useful when it rises, does its job, and then falls. Stress is a tool. The problem is not that your brain uses it, the problem is that the handle gets stuck. By day 7, that stuck handle leaves fingerprints everywhere. Hormones drift out of rhythm. Sleep gets lighter, more fragmented. Your prefrontal cortex has less control over impulses, so cravings for quick energy and comfort surge. Your mood swings faster and decisions tilt toward short-term relief instead of long-term goals. It's not weakness, it's metabolism under siege. Here's the pattern interrupt. The same timeline works in reverse. 7 days of chronic stress can start to bend hormone rhythms, memory, and emotions in one direction. But 7 days of intentional habits can begin nudging them back. A little more sleep, a brief walk, a boundary around late-night screens, even 2 minutes of slow breathing. Each one tells your brain, the danger is lower now. This marks a turning point in how you think about the next week, not as something to survive, but as a personal lab. A place to run tiny experiments and watch how your brain, your hormones, your cravings respond when you treat your body like it's worth protecting. Imagine the next 7 days as a fork in the road for your brain. One path is the same survival loop you've just seen. The other is a quiet, deliberate reset. Over this video, you've watched what happens when stress doesn't let up. Day 1, your alarm system flips on, cortisol and adrenaline flooding your body as your brain chooses speed over subtlety. By the middle of the week, memory starts slipping, simple words go missing, and your hippocampus is already paying the price as new brain cells slow their growth. Sleep breaks apart into shallow fragments, and the night is no longer a repair shop, just an extension of the day's tension. By days 6 and 7, this isn't a temporary glitch anymore. This is the phase when your brain starts treating stress as the new baseline. The amygdala's fear circuits fire. Faster, the prefrontal cortex, the part that helps you plan, focus, and pause before reacting, gets drowned out. It's like your inner CEO has been pushed out of the office while the fire alarm runs the meeting. Think of it this way. Every day of stress has been teaching your brain a lesson. But the central message is not that your brain is doomed. The message is that your brain is always learning. It is constantly reshaping connections in response to threat, but it is just as ready to rewire for safety, for rest, for small, repeated acts of care. The same plasticity that lets stress fray your circuits can also begin to stitch them back together. So here is your challenge. For the next 7 days, run a brain reset experiment. Pick one small daily habit that signals safety to your nervous system. 10 minutes of walking after work. A strict no-phone rule for the last 30 minutes before sleep. 3 slow breaths every time you sit down to eat. Then track what shifts your sleep depth, your mood swings, your memory for names, even your cravings for sugar or late-night scrolling. Meanwhile, use your own life as the lab notebook. Jot down what changes by day 3, by day 5, by day 7. In fact, share what you notice in the comments because your patterns might be the mirror someone else needs. If you want guided tours through other hidden weeks inside your body, what 7 days of stress do to your gut, your heart, your hormones, or how 7 days of recovery can start to reverse the damage. Subscribe or follow so you don't miss those breakdowns. This marks a turning point. If your brain can begin to fray in 7 days of chronic stress, it can also begin to heal in 7 days of intention. The next week is already on its way. What do you want your brain to practice becoming?